Now this is living. I'm up on the east side of the High Sierras, and I'm hoping to take a venture out today and see the Bristlecone Pines up on White Mountain. That's something I've never seen. These are reputed to be the oldest living trees in existence that we know about. And from what I've read, they're kind of scrawny little trees that just kind of, they're like big bonsais that just barely hang in there, and a lot of them are mostly dead with a little bit of life left on them. But the interesting thing is they're survivors. I'm also interested in looking at the quaking aspens today, which is another remarkable tree that lives at high elevation in incredibly cold climate. They get a lot of snow here, sometimes 6-8 feet of snow. And for any kind of tree to survive in that kind of temperature, I find just remarkable. So to start this off, let's go for a little bit of a tour of the area so you can see what it's like. I did take my drone up here, and there's some really beautiful big meadows out here. And it's an area that's on the east side of the Sierras that is just, there are lakes everywhere up here. It is so beautiful, and little creeks. As you can see, I'm doing an aerial shot up right at the edge of where the mountains go up, and you can see how many of the trees there are. And there's a lake in the background. That's where we stayed. Truly remarkable. Well, I had an opportunity to get away for a week. I went on vacation to one of my all-time favorite places in the whole world, which is the High Sierras in California. I never get tired, and when I go up there, I frequently have a good time looking at all the trees and seeing what's going on in the higher elevations. So this particular video, I'm going to be talking quite a bit about the pines that are up here, and they've got some different species of pine. They've got some limber pines, they've got some big sugar pines, the ponderosas, and they've got a few different types of trees, like a few spruce, and occasionally I see a juniper. That's a big one. Look at that old tree. Sadly, it's not very full though. We had some weather. The storms blew in, and we had a lot of thunder and lightning, and the winds picked up. It really changes so abruptly up there. As 1 minute the sky is clear blue, and in no time at all the wind kicks up and fills up the sky, and you're running for cover. We stayed near a lake, which was really pretty. This was the first night we got there, and it was a bit windy, a little bit treacherous to go out on. And while I was here, I had an opportunity to do something that I've always wanted to do. Always wanted to see the Bristlecone Pines up on White Mountain. They are reputed to be the oldest living tree in the world, and that's contested by a few other observations of some other species of old trees, but they certainly are unusual trees. They are so weathered and so interesting to look at because they're not big trees. Most of them, most of the really old trees are only about 25 to 35 feet tall. There's an old tree with an old friend behind it. That tree is probably 1,000 years old. It's hard to tell exactly how old these are because they do a lot of core borings and check them out. Oh, this is kind of cool. On some of the lower foliage on these bristlecone pines, they had little red tufts. That, my first thought was they were flowers, but they don't look like flowers. And I went into the local museum there, and they had a few examples of the wood sliced and polished. And this one right here, they cut this down in 1953, and they started dating it back. And it's pretty amazing. It goes all the way back to 437, and it's not that big of a piece of wood. You can see by my hand here. So an older chunk of wood. I think the oldest one that they've got in this whole preserve is just over 5,000 years old. I think it was 5,042. The Methuselah tree, that's not it, but it is reputed to be 4,900 and something. But there's a number of these trees that are, 2,000-3,000 years old. And the really healthy looking ones are not the old ones. The ones that are really old, they look like they're half dead, and they seem to just linger on. And there was there's a good close up of what the bristles, the bristle branches, they're real small tufts. I wanted to show you what it looked like up here. I was driving up to this high elevation area, which these trees are all between 9,000 and 11,000 feet. It's very, very dry and desolate. And then all of a sudden you get to an area where there's a few trees, and then it's much more populated. But they're not right next to each other. And one thing that is interesting is that the trees don't have a lot of competition, which means fires are very rare up there. These are some of the famous scientists that studied dendrochronology, and this was the Schulman Center here. This was kind of an interesting painting that somebody did of the Bristlecone Pines. I took a closer look at it. I thought that was pretty cool, actually. So I did spend a lot of time walking around on the trails. They ask you to stay to the trails because they're trying to protect the trees from erosion and other people-induced problems. One of these trees up here, the one over on the left up there, was it had a core boring, and it was 3,500 years old. And you can see how it kind of opens up into a sparse forest out here, but none of these trees are more than, I'd say 25, maybe 30 feet tall. And there isn't much other brush that grows in here at all. It's a real hostile environment. Like I said before, between 9,000 and 11,000 feet. I did find an area where there were some baby bristlecone pines. I have no idea how old those are, but it wouldn't surprise me if they were 100 years old. I need to find out more about these trees because they really do fascinate me. The weather did start picking up again before we left, and we did experience quite a bit of thunder. This was really interesting. There is an old miner's cabin on the property that was built in the 1860s, and it's pretty dilapidated now. They ask you not to go inside, and apparently it's not too safe. It doesn't look very safe, but it's kind of cool that the trees that were used for these cabins in this mine shaft over here were the local trees from up here, and you can see the old stumps from where they were cut down. There you go, that's what's left of the inside of that cabin. So if you look off to the right, you can see where the Bristlecone Pine Forest begins and goes all the way to the top of White Mountain. I don't know if you saw that, there was a little streak of lightning there. Thunder was really booming, and it was very, very threatening up here. There's the mine shaft, what's left of it. It's all caved in now. As you guys know, I'm really interested in wood, and you can see the marks here from where the axe and the hew, the boards that were flattened off were hand hewn. Oh, yeah. There's another baby bristlecone pine. I sure wish I knew how old these babies were and how quickly they evolve. I need to study them more. But like I said, this is the first and only time that I've ever been up here, and I thought it was just fascinating. There's a close-up of a smaller bristlecone pine. This one's just getting started. Beautiful terrain. Very, very, very dry, but it changes abruptly up high. And this is taken from where the mine shaft is. That's a big tailing pile. That whole area was what they pulled out of that mine shaft. And there's another one over off on the left there. That's what's left of that cabin. I'm sure it had a lot of chinking and a lot of stuff crammed into all those little cracks. Not a lot of moss grows up here. I wonder what they use to fill those cracks. And here comes the weather. It was starting to rain on us. I know the camera just doesn't do justice, but some of these lightning and thunder booms were just deafening. It was a little bit scary because you're right at the top of a mountain, and a lot of these streaks of lightning, you can see them come all the way down and hit the ground. And you have no idea where and when they're going to pop out at you. So we thought we'd go all the way up to the top to the Patriarch Grove, which you can drive up to, and as soon as we got started, it just opened up on us. The hail came down hard and heavy. I thought it'd be kind of interesting to get outside, and it hurt. There's my wife Gina. It was painful. The hail was big and hard. I think it dented my car, but I could see it wasn't getting any better. So unfortunately, I did not make it all the way up to the top of the mountain. But next time, I will certainly go up there. We were also very close to Mono Lake, and if you've never been to Mono Lake, it's a very, very salty, almost an ocean of a lake. And these growths, they all used to be underwater. Those are called tufa towers. They call that South Tufa. And we did make it back over to the lake, and it was a very nice evening. Went out with my camera. I also got out next morning and saw the sun come up out there. I just love being out on the water. Sometimes this water was as still as glass. It was unbelievable. You could see the fish in there. Oh, this is cool. Up there, close to the lake, is a nest with two parents, bald eagles, and a fledgling young bald eagle. And I actually saw them swoop down and get fish out of the lake. I was out there and I heard a big splash. And I looked over quickly. Sadly, I didn't have my camera ready, but this bird flew off. Listen carefully. And there it goes. I had so many views of these beautiful bald eagles, but I never had my camera ready. That was about the best I got. I had a couple of real close calls too, where they just flew up and they were just right there, but then they were gone almost instantaneously. So we did go out on a boat a few times, once on a canoe and once on a little motorboat. And I did try my hand at fishing, but the lake is not very full of fish right now, so I did hook onto one nice one, and sadly I lost it. I was fishing with a fly and had 2-pound test, and fish broke the line. Anyway, I had a great time. It was fun, even though I didn't catch anything. The thing about fishing is if you're a true fisherman, you don't really need to catch fish to enjoy yourself. Look at that. It was so glassy smooth at times. You know, you could see the reflections of all the mountains in the background in the water. I just truly loved it. So I decided to go off on yet another little adventure. I followed the creek that came out of the lake and went cross country. I went following it down because I just wanted to see what it looked like. And truthfully, I was seeing if there was any fish in this little stream. There was tiny ones, but nothing worth going after. But it was quite an adventure. It was really pretty and very serene. I did see a lot of interesting trees and a lot of interesting things. There's the quaking aspen, showing how the leaves all move in the slightest breeze. It's like when the breeze comes up, the quaking aspen does its thing first, and then you'll see the other trees start to move. It was a long hike. I hiked several miles down through the creek area here. You know, for the last part of this video, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey. I want you to be keenly aware of the sorts of things that I'm paying attention to, primarily with the trees, but not just the trees. There's a there's a lot of wildlife and a lot of things that are going on in this forest. From the wild flowers to the different variations in foliage. At first, when you're hiking down through the creek area, higher up, it's primarily pines. And as you get down a little bit lower, you start seeing all sorts of other things. There's some wild roses there. But you start seeing a lot of the aspen trees. They'll start in small areas. There'll be a few aspens, then all of a sudden there'll be nothing but aspens. So it entirely changes. I find that fascinating. I also noted that there was a number of areas where trees had fallen down, which led me to wonder why. I don't know why so many people feel that they have to carve their names or their dates in the trees, the aspen trees, but it's interesting to note some of the ages of these dates, because it gives you a better idea of just how old some of those trees actually are and how they're survivors. There was one area that I went to where a very large number, probably 100 trees, were either dead, laying on the ground, or had been uprooted, and in many cases the root balls were still up in the air, which led me to think that there must have been pretty massive flooding 2-3 years ago. There are some of those younger aspens, which are still probably 40-50 years old. The older aspens, I would imagine some of those are well over 100, maybe even closer to 150 years old. It's interesting that an aspen grove underground, all the trees connect to each other, so it's more like one big tree. It's like the roots all go together and send out little individual trees, but because they're connected, it's like a network of trees. I did get up off the road and hike along some of the drier areas. You can see there's still a number of pines. Then I spotted this. This really confused me. I wanted to say, what caused that one tree to die? And as I got in closer, it was very apparent that the red-breasted sapsucker was at work. And I don't know why they focused on this one tree, but they hit it so hard that the upper portion of it died. There's a beautiful old tree. Interesting, while I was up there, I met a guy and asked him about had he ever gone to see the Bristlecone Pines. And he kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, yeah, just a bunch of trees. And I thought, you don't really see these trees the way I see these trees. I look at each of these trees as an individual, and I look at all the uniqueness of all the different trees. So as I was walking along, I was across the meadow, I spotted something, on the other side down where the creek was running. And it caused me to venture back out into the middle of the meadow, and here's what I saw. It was a tree that had completely gone down, and I thought, now why did that tree fall over when all the rest of them are still standing? And it became very clear to me that at one time the runoff from the lake flooded, and there was a flash flood that went through here, that in some areas the water undermined a lot of these trees and they went down. So there was one whole area that there was probably 100 trees that were either listing and leaning on each other or had completely gone down. So many wildflowers. It was really, really pretty. I did have an opportunity to get up over the pass. I went over the Sonora Pass. And there's wildflowers everywhere. It's just so, so beautiful. So this last bit, I'm just going to let you watch it, enjoy it. Oh, there goes another big tree that went down. But do pay attention. At the very end, I did spot a red-breasted sapsucker. It took me a little while to identify it. I got the book out, and I'm sure of what it was. But you'll see little apartments in some of these trees, individual holes. It seems like they single out one tree, and they riddle it with little nesting holes. I thought it was interesting, and I did spot one area where there was both the father and the mother feeding a whole family of little birds, and standing there you could hear the little birds chirping, and it was interesting to see just how much work it was for those parent birds. They were flying back and forth all day long, from early dawn till dark. And yet another big tree that went down. So I hope you enjoy this little trip to the High Sierras, the eastern side of the High Sierras. And if you get an opportunity to get up there, pay attention. Pay attention to all the little details. You never know what you're going to find. The evidence of men and the destruction that they do, but also the marks that they leave behind. I find it fascinating.